If you're a baseball fan, you are perhaps familiar with former big league manager Lou Piniella for probably one specific reason.
Could be the one. There it is, number one, the first ejection.
And now kicks in his hand.
To be how creative as you want to on team win. Look at this.
There have been thousands of managers in MLB history, and Piniella is tied for 12th all time for most ejections with 64, being just one of 15 managers ever to be tossed from a game that many times. Of course, ejections are one thing, but outbursts are another, and Piniella has perhaps the most memorable tirades by any manager, only behind legend Earl Weaver. There's even a 13-minute long video covering a single confrontation Piniella had where, long story short, he fought one of his own players. Say what you want about Piniella, and while his antics on the field are what he's best known for, he was actually a fantastic manager, truly one of the greatest of all time. He managed in Major League Baseball for 23 seasons from 1986 to 2010. During his career, he won 1,835 games, the 17th most all-time for a manager as of August 2023. In addition to those wins, Piniella also took home the Manager of the Year award 3 times, just one of 9 managers ever to win the award that many times. During his long career, Piniella was the manager for the New York Yankees, Cincinnati Reds, Seattle Mariners, Tampa Bay Devil Rays, and Chicago Cubs. He made the playoffs 7 times, which includes 4 League Championship Series appearances and 1 World Series win, coming with the Reds in 1990. To date, the most recent World Series appearance for Cincinnati. While on the Mariners, he guided them to their first postseason appearance during their improbable 1995 season, and also managed the club during their record-tying 116-win season in 2001. While it may be an unpopular opinion, I believe Piniella belongs in the Hall of Fame. He's one of the most winningest managers of all time, one of the most decorated with his 3 awards, and has a World Series win with several playoff appearances. Many times did he take over a losing, underperforming team and turn them into a contender, something that many can claim. Despite the incredible resume and Hall of Fame-worthy career, Piniella was not perfect and had one of the dumbest managerial decisions in playoff history. A decision that came as a member of the 2007 Chicago Cubs. Before we get to Piniella's decision, it's important to understand just how incredible it was the Cubs made the playoffs in 2007 to begin with. In Piniella's first season as a Cubs manager, Chicago started the year off dreadfully, being as many as 9 games under 500 when they reached a record of 22-31 in early June. Despite not reaching the 500 mark until July, a strong 63-46 record in the last 4 months pushed them into first place, absolutely sneaking into the postseason with a lackluster 85-77 record, just 2 games ahead of the Milwaukee Brewers. Despite a good but not great record, the Cubs still had a solid team that could compete with other contenders. They may have only won 85 games, but had a strong team nevertheless and found themselves facing the Arizona Diamondbacks in the National League Division Series. Something else to consider is the fact that 2007 marked 99 years since the Cubs last won the World Series. Ever since their last World Series win in 1908, Chicago have returned to the World Series an additional 7 times and 11 total playoff appearances, only to come up short each and every time. Speaking of championship droughts, there was not 1, but 2 World Series droughts broken only a few years prior to 2007. The Boston Red Sox broke their 86-year drought in 2004, and the Chicago White Sox broke their 88-year drought in 2005. It seemed more vital than ever for the Cubs to finally win the World Series. Something also to note, without going into too much detail, let's just say the National League was up in the air that season. There wasn't a clear favorite to win the pennant, it was anyone's game. In a weak year for the league, it was a golden chance for the Cubs to capitalize. In the National League Division Series, the Game 1 starting pitcher for Chicago was Carlos Zambrano, and it's this game where we see the decision in question by Piniella. But first, a brief overview of Zambrano. In 2007, Zambrano went 18-13 with a 3.95 ERA, 117 adjusted ERA, and a 1.331 WHIP across 216 and a third innings pitched and 34 games started. Of those stats, his wins and innings pitched led all Cubs pitchers that season. With the Diamondbacks lineup full of right-handed hitters, Zambrano was the clear number 1 starter for Chicago, someone the team could heavily rely on. Opposite Zambrano was Brandon Webb, the starter who took the hill for Arizona. Webb was that season's Cy Young runner-up, was 1 year removed from winning the award, and was all around one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball. Facing arguably the best pitcher in the National League on the road, it was all hands on deck for the Cubs. Much to the delight of the team, Zambrano was locked in. Both starting pitchers cruised for the first 3+ innings before the Diamondbacks scored first off the Cubs thanks to a solo home run by shortstop Stephen Drew. Zambrano settled in after the home run and kept the Arizona hitters in check for the next 2 innings to keep the score 1-0 entering the 6th. In the top of the 6th, the Cubs rallied. 2 2-out walks load the bases for Ryan Theriot, who hit a ground ball single to tie the game at 1. With the bases still loaded, Zambrano came to the plate in the next at-bat but struck out to end the frame, 1-1 entering the bottom of the 6th. In that inning, Zambrano continued his dominance. He did allow a single to Stephen Drew, but induced a flyout and groundout to end the inning, still tied after 6. Brandon Webb continued his excellence, throwing a 1-2-3 inning in the top of the 7th. The bottom of the 7th is where we finally see the decision made by Lou Piniella. You see, Piniella decided not to keep Carlos Zambrano in the game. He was lifted after 6 terrific innings, allowing just 1 run, 4 hits, 1 walk, and striking out 8 batters. Piniella lifting his starter in this situation is absolutely the wrong decision for many reasons, and I'll tell you why. First, this was one of Zambrano's best performances of the season. He was absolutely dialed in. In 34 starts during the regular season, there were only 2 instances in which Zambrano pitched at least 6 innings, allowed no more than 1 run, struck out at least 8 batters, and allowed no more than 4 hits and 1 walk. Given how well he was performing, especially against a playoff team, why not keep him in the game? I bet some of you may be thinking, Zambrano might have been at a high pitch count, so naturally it makes sense to remove him from the game. Well, that could not be further from the case. When Zambrano was taken out, he was sitting at 85 pitches. That is not a lot. Maybe today it's somewhat high, but for an established starting pitcher in 2007, that was nothing. However, to further cement that point, let's look again at Zambrano's 34 starts made during the regular season. Do you want to know how many of those starts featured Zambrano throwing fewer than 85 pitches? 1. There was a single game out of 34 during 2007 in which Carlos Zambrano threw fewer than 85 pitches, and it was an 80-pitch, 5-inning performance against the San Francisco Giants on July 18th. Even though Zambrano only threw 80 pitches, he was taken out when the Cubs were winning 9-0. Certainly, it's conceivable he was only removed due to such a large lead, and had the score remained much closer against the Giants, Zambrano most likely would have remained in. Furthermore, out of his 34 starts made during the regular season, 28 of them saw him throw at least 100 pitches, and more than half had him throw over 110. 18 times during 2007 did Zambrano throw over 110 pitches, and while that is absurd by today's standard, it demonstrates he could have kept going in Game 1. A third, less important reason to keep Zambrano in was the fact that his turn in the lineup was not due to bat in the following inning. The cleanup hitter was set to lead off for the Cubs in the top of the 8th, and like all pitchers, Zambrano was slotted 9th in the lineup, meaning he would not even come to the plate until 2 outs in the 9th inning. Alas, as the bottom of the 7th inning came up, Zambrano was out, and in was relief pitcher Carlos Marmol. Do you want to know what happened in the very first at-bat Marmol faced?
The game will be decided by the bullpen, and this is a first example. High fly ball deep to left center field, way back. And this one is gone, a home run for Mark Reynolds.
That home run was the deciding run, as Arizona won the game 3-1. Now, I'm also certain some people may be thinking, is this really that bad of a decision? Sure, Zambrano was nearly lights out for the first 6 innings, but the bullpen was lights out too during the regular season. In particular, the pitcher who replaced Zambrano, Carlos Marmol, was one of the best relievers in Major League Baseball during 2007. That year, he pitched 69 1/3 innings, earning a 1.43 ERA and 325 adjusted ERA. There were 144 relief pitchers to throw at least 50 innings in 2007, and Marmol's 1.43 ERA is the 3rd lowest mark, and his adjusted ERA was the best mark. He was arguably the best relief pitcher in baseball that year. Given that notion, many might think it's not a bad idea to bring in Marmol to pitch given his stats. Him allowing the 2 runs was just unlucky. To that I say, No, it was still a terrible decision. It's one thing to take out Zambrano at 85 pitches, but it's why Piniella chose to do so. Lou Piniella decided to take out Carlos Zambrano after 6 innings in order to use him on short rest for a potential Game 4. When asked about his decision, Piniella was quoted saying, "I've got a good bullpen here, okay, and I trust my bullpen. I'm bringing back a pitcher on 3 days rest on Sunday and I took a shot with my bullpen. It didn't work today. They've done it all year. I've got confidence in them. Period. End of story." I am no baseball manager myself, nor have I ever held any type of coaching position, but in a series where 3 losses eliminates you from the postseason, why plan for a hypothetical Game 4? As Chicago Tribune writer Rick Morrissey wrote, "Rule number 1, you win the game that's in front of you. Rule number 2, there is no rule number 2. There is no guarantee you make it to Game 4, and the fact that your ace is pitching brilliantly on the road, you keep him in as long as he can go without worrying about the future games in the series. And if you don't believe me when I say Zambrano could have kept going, perhaps you'll believe the man himself." He was quoted saying he asked Piniella if he could pitch one more inning, but Piniella balked at the idea and said no. Before continuing, I need to emphasize that the decision to go to the bullpen is not the sole reason why the Cubs lost Game 1, as the bats were ice cold, scoring just 1 run and going 1 for 9 with runners in scoring position. This would normally be a non-story had the events played out as they did, but it's the fact that Zambrano was removed from the game for the sole purpose that he could be used for a situation that may or may not happen. If you're unfamiliar with how the series progressed, as it turns out, that hypothetical Game 4 never happened. The Cubs were swept in the National League Division Series, and Zambrano never even got a chance to pitch a second game. While we'll never know the outcome, perhaps the series changes had Zambrano came back out to pitch the 7th inning. He could have kept the D-backs bats down, and the Cubs could have eventually won Game 1. Even if they lose the next 2 games, Chicago could very well have won Games 4 and 5 to win the series. And who knows how far they could have progressed in the postseason. Of course, all of that is speculation, and it is due to Lou Piniella's decision to remove his ace prematurely. The dumbest decision of his long, respected managerial career.